Welcome. Welcome to week one, the role of the policymaker. As many of you know, if you've taken a class with me beforehand, I really like to use these videos in YouTube to kind of preview the upcoming week, review the past week as we go forward. So about 5 minutes or so, 5 to 10 minutes per video, just to kind of hit the high points coming up. And this week, obviously, we're talking about the role of the policymaker. We're going to talk about bias and structured analytical techniques in a few weeks, but this point is the intelligence relationship for consumers. And what I want to ask is, well, let me start off with a case study, and some of you might have heard this case study. The Gulf War, I call it Gulf War I, back in 1990. And I think this case study illustrates the policymaker, intelligence analyst relationship. So back then in 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. It was a big deal at the time. I know in retrospect it was probably a smaller deal, but it was up until 2 weeks ago, the first time a country invaded another sovereign country with the goal of annexing it. And the intelligence community missed it. Or let me backtrack. The policymakers missed it. The intelligence community was remarkably accurate on Saddam Hussein's intentions and the order of battle on how Kuwait was going to be invaded. But the policymakers, instead of listening to the intelligence community, listened to the network of Arab leaders, including the al-Sabah family in Kuwait, who said that Saddam Hussein was just bluffing. Is this an intelligence failure? I'm under the 2% that say, yes, it is an intelligence failure. Because I believe the policymaker, that last point, that communicating to the policymaker and decisions that a policymaker can make are part of the intelligence process, part of the intelligence cycle. I also think this kind of illustrates the policymaker intelligence analyst dilemma. Because in this case, the policymaker completely ignored the advice from the intelligence community because they went through their own private channels. Is that a dysfunctional relationship? Possibly. But is it also dysfunctional if the policymaker didn't have scrutiny for the intelligence community's analysis? That's also a dysfunctional relationship, which I'll talk in a bit. So I think the Gulf War I kind of illustrates some of the issues that you will read about this week. And just to emphasize again, the intelligence policymaker relationship. And many of the readings that you might have had in my class or in this class is saying that there's a wall. Intelligence does this, policymakers do this, and there's a wall in between. And the reason is you don't want to get intelligence, you want the intelligence to be based on the information coming in. You don't want it based on political biases and agendas by policymakers. That's all great, and that sounds good, but in reality, if you have that wall, that wall is permeable. Information can pass back and forth, and you want that. You want to have a close relationship. You want the intelligence to be relevant to the policymaker. You don't want just them to be behind a wall, not engaging in any information. And you do want the information to be adjusted to fit the policymaker's desires. You don't want the information to be changed, but if the policymaker wants, let's say we're talking about Ukraine now, and he wants an estimate on Vladimir Putin's intentions in this week 2 of the war, well, you don't want the intelligence to be irrelevant to that. You want to be responsive to that policy maker's desire. So, you want that functional relationship, and you want information coming back and forth and requests and desires to go back and forth. And that brings me to my final word, politicization. Such a nasty word, right? Intelligence is politicized. Therefore, you're politicizing intelligence. Therefore, you're a bad person. Sometimes we just throw that word around just to as a kind of a pejorative term. You're politicizing intelligence. Let me just start up with saying that all intelligence is politicized in one form or another. Right now, policymakers want to know about Ukraine, obviously, for obvious reasons. But the fact that the policymakers are asking about Ukraine and Russia's intentions in Ukraine, that politicizes intelligence in one form or another. Assets have to be dedicated to this short-term tactical question instead of long-term assessments. Analysts have to look into that. Analysts have to research it. So now the policymaker has said that Ukraine is the priority and the intelligence community kind of goes in. That's politicization of intelligence. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's reality. So that politicization happens. The problem is the Iraq WMD case study, which you'll look at. We looked at if you took my class previously, and we'll look at in this class as well. In this case, and let me backtrack. Politicization does not necessarily mean that the intelligence analyst is being forced to rewrite estimates or rewrite analysis. What politicization in this case was that it was very clear that the policymakers wanted to hear certain things about Iraq WMD. They wanted to hear it was a threat. They wanted to hear that it was that Iraq was in association with Al-Qaeda. If you're an analyst and you want to get your information read, or you want to brief at the highest level, which is a pathway to promotion, that has to be in the back of your mind, that the stuff that I'm only going to get read is the stuff that the policymaker wants to hear. And that's what happened or a part of what happened in the Iraq WMD case study. I have a paper, I'm not assigning it here, but it's kind of a preview to Iraq WMD. Some of you might remember the targeting of the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical plant in Sudan, which everyone thought was a chemical weapons facility. It wasn't, but what happened was that Bill Clinton asked for 2 targets. He said, well, Al-Qaeda had struck both 2 embassies in Tanzania and in Kenya, and then Bill Clinton says, oh, I want to strike 2 targets. Well, I'll tell you what, if the president says, I want to strike 2 targets, then there's going to be 2 targets, regardless of how information is or how viable those targets are. I suspect that happened recently in Afghanistan, where they targeted that they thought it was an ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan vehicle. In fact, it was a civilian target. I suspect someone in the chain says, 12 Americans are dead, I want to get revenge, go get me revenge, or make sure you never have that again. And I think that cascaded through the intelligence analysis and led to bad estimates from happening. So that's something to be aware of, whether you're on the policy side or you're on the intelligence side as well. And then I mentioned the day-to-day relationships. You'll see more tactical intelligence being given. I don't know if there's a way to solve that. The politicians are involved in the day-to-day media cycle. Ukraine is what the issue du jour is. No one's thinking about the 5-year estimates and 10-year estimates for a politician, and that affects the day-to-day issues that we'll talk about in this week. So that covers week 1. If there's any issues or any problems, let me know. I hope everyone had a good spring break, and I will see you guys on the discussion boards.